local history, local culture, local events, your community. This is the Joe Kelly Show.
And welcome to the show, everybody. Thanks for joining us. The Oneida County Sheriff is with us, Rob Maciol, the 61st sheriff in Oneida County history, which goes back a long time for the sheriff's office. We're going to be talking a variety of things, including a temporary escape that happened the other day, some lockdown at the correctional facility, and a lot of other things, including these bus cameras that you're going to be interested in. Before we do that, we're going to say welcome. Good to see you, as always.
Same here. Thank you for having me.
61st sheriff of Oneida County, and
Yes.
The office of sheriff goes back to what year?
1798. Our first sheriff was actually appointed. He was the sheriff of both Herkimer and Oneida County, so I don't know if they were having troubles recruiting back then or not, but one sheriff for two counties, and then from there, obviously, from that point forward, it was just the sheriff was just the sheriff of Oneida County.
You had an incident the other day, not you, the office had an incident the other day where somebody was being transported,
Yes.
got away for a short time. How long did he get away?
Probably a matter of just a couple minutes, but what had happened is actually it was a transport van with several inmates in it. They were taken to Utica City Court. The court appearances for all those inmates had taken place. They were actually exiting the Utica courthouse, and two inmates attempted to escape. One of them, and obviously this was something that was thought out, but one of them attempted to escape, only got a matter of a few feet away from the transport van, was grabbed by one of the transport officers. At that time, while that one officer, one of a team of officers, was distracted with that inmate, the second one took off, made their way around the building, out to the front on Oriskany Street. And actually someone was waiting in traffic with a phone. They pulled out their phone and they made a brief video of it. That video went viral. I mean, we're talking, we're more than 1 million views once it hit the social media platforms and TikTok and whatnot. But the correction officer that he broke away from stayed in pursuit of him. A couple of plainclothes Utica police officers obviously were in the right place at the right time. They also joined in on the brief foot chase. Now, mind you, the individual was handcuffed in the front. He wasn't shackled, and that's a matter that obviously we're looking into at this point. I can't get into the specifics of any internal investigations, but that's an embarrassing thing for any agency to have happen, and we're not happy about it. But at the end of the day, he was quickly captured. No one was hurt. He did go up to a vehicle and attempt to get in the vehicle. You see that on the video. Yeah. But there wasn't anyone in that vehicle at the time. The person operating that vehicle saw the foot chase coming towards them. They actually stepped out of their vehicle in an attempt to, I'm assuming initially they thought they'd be able to assist, but they quickly saw that that wasn't going to happen, so they stepped away from their vehicle. So he was actually going to an unoccupied vehicle at that time, but quickly taken into custody and obviously returned to the facility.
What will happen to those two? Do they go before a judge now? What happens?
They face escape charges, which is a felony. They've both been arraigned on those charges. They obviously. They're in for serious things initially or already, so this is another thing added on top of them. So now, obviously, their consequences are much more severe. These people aren't going to be released. They're not one of the ones that fall into the bail reform category that we always talk about because they already were in custody and one had a parole violation. So there were a lot of different charges there, but they are in custody, and like I said, it's not a thing that we're happy about, but we'll ensure that. We do our best to make sure that doesn't happen.
What is the standard operating procedure for transporting to and from Oneida County Courthouse in terms of shackles?
Typically, everyone is handcuffed in front, and then they wear a chain around their stomach. It's sometimes referred to as a belly chain, where the handcuffs are attached to that chain, and a black box is placed over the handcuffs so they can't get to them, and then there's shackles on their ankles. Now, there are certain circumstances where certain individuals under proper authorization wouldn't be shackled. Just to give an example, and it doesn't apply in this case, but by law, female inmates that are pregnant can't be shackled. And then there are other medical reasons where a male may not be shackled, and that's the matter that we're sorting out internally as we speak. So,
how frequent? It's a daily thing, isn't it, or almost daily, transporting prisoners from the correctional facility to the county?
About 250 times a week.
Really? I didn't know it was that high.
Between court appearances for arraignment in the 2 city courts, that occurs every day. We have multiple hearings and obviously trials and, suppression hearings, medical appointments. We have, sometimes, and we currently have an inmate that has to receive, because of a severe medical condition they have to be taken out for daily medical treatments. So we're moving inmates probably 250 times a week in and out of the facility at any given time. And those are always a concern for us. We change up routes of travel. We ensure that, if there's any high-risk inmates. So obviously these 2 now will be high-risk inmates moving forward. So that we're always constantly, it's a struggle.
And you have deputies at the courthouse to bring people internally in that building, right?
There's also court security. There are court attendants, and then there's armed deputies in the courthouse. So it's a very, there's a lot of detail in our day-to-day operations of the sheriff's office.
Hasn't it all that been cut down because you've got a process that you can use up at the correctional facility?
Centralized arraignment takes away the initial arraignment of any defendant when they're initially charged. And then we also, so again, during COVID, that was a lot easier for us because we were allowed to do things virtually because of the emergency conditions we were under. But that's all gone now. We've returned to in-person court appearances. There's a huge push. We continue to lobby daily for those in power of the court system to let us revert back to these virtual appearances for these minor offenses or these simple hearings, because there's many times where I'll tie up officers for hours upon hours in city court when once the inmate finally gets into the hearing, it lasts a matter of 5 minutes. And sheriffs struggle with that all across the state. So, we definitely need some legislative changes which would allow us to utilize technology so that they could have their appearances from the jail much safer. You're not going to get in an accident. You're not going to have any escapes. You're certainly going to save on manpower and time, but that's a fight for another day.
All right. When we come back, we need to talk about the new cameras that are on a lot of
Very
buses.
exciting project.
Yeah. Oneida County Sheriff Rob Maciol is our guest. We'll be right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Oneida County Sheriff Rob Maciol is our guest. We're talking some local law enforcement issues, including, for years I've wondered about this. If a school bus is pulled over, flashing lights and all, and a car goes by them illegally, unless the school bus driver gets a plate or something, how are you going to follow up on that? But there's a way now.
Sure. Traditionally, you're right. Either the bus driver had to capture a plate number, get the plate number, look at what the driver looked like, call the police. We would take a deposition. We can still do that. That'll still allow us to do that. The other way, occasionally police, we would follow school buses and try to catch people on, those runs where they have hot spots. But I'm going to throw a staggering number at you. 50,000 buses stopped letting kids off are passed per day in New York State. 50,000 buses are passed daily in New York State, a day. A lot of the numbers, granted, are downstate where the huge volume of traffic is, but still. And it's an issue because, again, bus driver, we get complaints all the time, but most complaints we can't follow up on because we don't have the information that we need. So with new technology, there is a company, Vera Mobility, and I went to the county executive actually just prior to the pandemic kicking in. So this is a project we began to work on in 2019, finally just got it unveiled the other day. But basically, Vera Mobility is a company that provides, well, first the county had to pass a local ordinance. There's a legal process we had to go through. But this company actually will go to a school district. They'll install cameras, high-tech cameras on the exterior of the buses for the districts that want to partake in the program. As the bus driver's doing their daily route, anytime once the arms come out on the bus and the lights come on, the camera's activated. Any vehicle that passes that stop school bus, the license plate will be clearly captured. That information is then sent via a secure link to our office, where a police officer, one of our deputies, actually an investigator, will review those tapes. And when the investigator determines that, yes, in fact, that bus was passed, he signs off on that violation. Then a violation is mailed to the registered owner of the vehicle with a $250 fine. In 2019, the New York State Legislature passed a law which created this ability for counties to fine the registered owners. It's very similar to the cameras you see on the thruway. So when you go through the toll booth, if you don't have an easy pass, you get a bill in the mail. It's kind of the same concept because it captures the plate. So each day, like I said, because it's a violation not committed in our presence, the police officer has to view the video first, signs off on it. The trial period we're in right now, because the county executive and I unveiled this program a week ago, actually almost 2 weeks ago. So the first 30 days, you will get a warning saying that your car just passed a stop school bus. On June 12th, after the 30-day warning period, that will change to a fine. $250 first offense, $350 second offense. I think the third offense, I don't have my notes with me, but it goes up significantly. And again, this violation is going to the registered owner. Mm-hmm. So if your child is driving your car and your child passes a stop school bus, you're going to get the fine because it's the registered owner. And it's one of our colleagues in Broome County. They started a similar program a year ago. They issued 5,000 tickets in a year to people passing stop school buses. So as we speak today, there are 191 buses in Oneida County equipped with our camera system. There's like 7 or 8 districts that have taken part in it. We still have 4 or 5 more districts that we're hoping, once they see the success of this program, they will jump on board. And
the funding from this comes from where?
It is 100% funded by the offenders. So Vera Mobility, the company, no money is required up front by the county or the school district. Vera Mobility mounts their technology on the buses, provides us the technology that we need on our end, and as the fines start to roll in, the county will get a portion of the fine, the vendor will get a portion of the fine as their profit, and the remaining goes to offset to pay for the cost of the equipment. So it's very similar to a Stop DWI program. It's 100% funded by the offenders, and it's another tool to keep our kids safe.
And you mentioned Broome County has this in existence now.
Yes.
And it's been successful, I assume?
Very successful. Like I said, they're over 5,000 violations have been issued so far.
And what other counties are doing it?
There's a handful in the state. It's relatively new. Again, this piggybacks off of a new law that the state legislature passed, like I said, in late 2019, but then the COVID kicked in. So no one could really do anything with contracts, and school was shut down obviously for almost 2 school years. So all those things in conjunction came together. We were able to kick ours off a week ago at the Sequoia School District. That's one of the school districts that's on board with the program. And we had it displayed for the media, and they were able to see the technology working.
Is this an easy sell for the districts?
I would think so. I mean, it does. Again, they don't have to put no money up front. We're not imposing on anyone's privacy. It's not a camera inside the bus. It's a camera on the outside of the buses. And it's a clear problem, not only here in our county, but across this entire state.
Yeah. Cameras, boy, they're getting so big. And I'm not sure if it was your office or another law enforcement agency, there was a crime committed somewhere and they asked for people from their home cameras.
We do it all the time.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many people have Ring doorbell, security cameras. Like I said, businesses, even like the escape we talked about in the first segment, we've got multiple cameras from downtown that captured this event, at different angles. So it's just technology's come so far.
Yeah. And there are cameras, body cameras worn by officers.
All
yes?
the members of the sheriff's office, several other agencies. There's a handful of other agencies. I know Utica Police Department, Rome Police Department. I'm pretty sure Rome does, but that's one of the best tools that we invested in. Not only does it build accountability and trust with the community, but it's a clear picture for the district attorney's office or a jury trial of everything that's happening. And it's exonerated officers multiple times. When someone attempts to file a personnel complaint, I mean, we can easily pull up the video, and in many cases the people are not correct in what they thought they were seeing.
And it works both ways.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Do those cameras, those body cameras, are they on all the time, or do they get turned on when the deputy gets out of the car?
Depends on the policy of the agency. Like ours are in a mode, a standby mode at all times. So when a deputy gets a radio call for, let's say, a domestic dispute, before he answers the call before he responds to that call, he puts his body camera on as he's driving to the call. Because again, when you get out of the car, and if it's a situation like where your adrenaline's really flowing, you may forget to turn that camera on. That's why our policy, we turn it on ahead of them arriving at the call. So we actually view them driving to the call, and again, it captures everything that officer is seeing. Mm-hmm. Granted, there's other areas that you may not capture, but it's a pretty impressive tool.
I know for a while it was. Well, I forget how long your deputies have had it, but I remember talking to law enforcement people back in the day when they weren't that turned on by all this.
No, most older, senior people, any change is really not, and I say it as a guy who's been on the job 35 years, change is not in our vocabulary, and a lot of people struggle with that. But once you get used to it, and now with so many new people coming into the career, it's whether it's the computer in the car, because when that came, I thought that was the end of the world because I was still working on the street back then. But for someone new coming in, they're starting out with it.
Right. Oneida County Sheriff Rob Maciol is our guest. Short break. Right back. And thanks for sticking with us, everybody. Welcome back. Oneida County Sheriff Rob Maciol is our guest. We're talking about lots of stuff. One of the other things that made the news recently, Sheriff, was a lockdown at the correctional facility because of, would you have one or two overdoses?
Well, we had a series of them. Initially, we had one inmate get ill, along with two officers. Then the next day, just prior to that, we had an inmate who overdosed and was transported to the hospital. We had another incident, and I'm going back, I'm giving you a 2 to 3 week span here. We also had an inmate who had passed away, and obviously that's under investigation not only by our office, but the Attorney General's office and the New York State Commission of Corrections. Again, we're kind of linking all these things together. And then recently so obviously we have, like every other jail in the state, we have an issue with contraband making its way into our facility. Today we're dealing with some very dangerous drugs, whether we're talking about heroin, fentanyl, some of these synthetic drugs. People in custody are becoming very creative on how it gets into the facility. We've changed a while back, we've changed our entire system on how mail comes into the facility. We have a special device that scans mail for suspicious substances. We have a drug dog that sniffs the mail. We have hoods, vented hoods, where the officers actually open up the mail prior, because the mail is opened and it's copied, and copies are given to the inmates, because what was happening is inmates were actually receiving mail on special paper that had been sprayed with some type of synthetic drug, and the inmates would smoke or consume the paper when they could sneak that in. It's an incredible struggle. We have people through visitation where, and I know I've mentioned this before, New York State is the only state left in the entire country where it's mandated that inmates, when they visit with their loved ones, kiss on the lips, and sometimes contraband is passed in a kiss and they retrieve it later on. We've had it, again, inmates coming in during it, through the admission process, where they have contraband hidden on their bodies. I don't want to get into detail on that, but you can only imagine where things are hidden on their bodies. So it's very, very difficult for jails to keep contraband out of their facilities. So we were in lockdown for several times last week. Basically, as our CERT team, that stands for Sheriff's Emergency Response Team, as our CERT team, in conjunction with our criminal investigation unit and our forensics unit, went through cell by cell, nearly the entire facility, and we recovered additional contraband, both drugs and some type of items that could be used as weapons. Those are things we seized. So it's definitely a struggle in the correctional field, not only here in Oneida County and here in the state, but across the country. Record numbers of contraband are making their ways into the jails. It's our population may be down slightly from where we were a couple years ago, but the inmates that we have in our custody not only are more dangerous, they're more challenging. I could get into a whole topic on the amount of inmates that we have with us suffering from mental illness. They don't belong in our facilities, but there's nowhere else to put them. So it's definitely a mess, and throw on top of that significant staffing shortages in correctional facilities across the state makes it extremely challenging and very dangerous.
I was going to ask you about that. You've had a long time problem recruiting correctional officers. Yes. Still existing? Still
exists today. 6 months ago, New York State Civil Service changed their process on how people, to try to make it easier for us, and it does help a little bit. 6 months ago, there were 13 jails in New York State that were facing critical staffing shortages. Today, that 13 has changed to 41. 41 jails in New York State are facing critical staffing shortages.
Is it because the state pays better, has better benefits?
No, because the state's dealing with the same thing that we are. The issues at hand, the national media has hurt law enforcement. That's part of it. The HALT Act in New York State. The negativity towards law enforcement over the past 4 or 5 years. You look at the HALT Act in New York State, where now, no matter what an inmate does in our custody, the consequences that they face for breaking the rules, being disorderly, are very little to nothing. Even the worst of the worst still get 7 hours out of their cell for recreation time. Okay, even the worst of the worst still have to get their recreation time. You look at that. You look at when inmates are throwing feces and urine at correction officers, and the consequences that they face for doing that are little to nothing. All these things put together, even though in our corrections side of the house we have a settled contract, there were significant pay raises. It's not always because of the pay that people want a job, and it's very difficult. It's very challenging. I mean, every workforce across the nation is facing shortages, but I think corrections is one of the ones at the top as far as significant gaps.
I know the snowmobiles have been put away, but have the boats come out yet?
Boats are out. Boats are on the water. The waterways obviously will get busy here in the next couple of weeks, but we've already been very busy on Sylvan Beach with the opening of walleye season. Obviously, that's one of the fish that lake is most known for. Actually, I was in Sylvan Beach late last week, meeting with the mayor and a security company that they hire, preparing for our summer plans for our involvement in things up there. And I was able, when I left that meeting, I was able to go out and talk to some fishermen working the shorelines on the canal, because my dad took me there as a kid when my dad was alive, and I grew up on that lake, and my dad fished it for over 70 years, but brought back a lot of good memories. But it's also a beautiful place. I mean, it's a beautiful body of water, and there's lots of fun things to do, like there are in many other places around the county.
On the way here today, I went past the Oneida County Sheriff's vehicle. I think it was a Ford Explorer.
Could be.
Yeah. How long do you keep your vehicles? Do you have a mileage thing, and after that you say they gotta go?
Prior to our enterprise rental car agreement from a few years ago, we would drive our cars pretty much into the ground. Because when one unit was done with them, we try to shift it somewhere else where it could be utilized, because we just, they weren't worth a whole lot. We signed a contract with Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Nearly our entire fleet now is leased through Enterprise. It's a national company, obviously. And we are able to turn these cars over much quicker, which cuts down on repair costs. The rental company makes their money on the resale of these vehicles. So we get rid of them, in that 75 to 100,000 mile range. But in a world that we live in, a patrol car could easily put 75,000 miles on in a year. So sometimes they're with us somewhere between 1 and 2 years. Some of the unit or cars that are assigned to the units that don't put as much mileage on will last another year or two more. But typically, we want to be able to keep our fleet less than 4 years young, just so that we're ensuring a good, safe, reliable vehicle for our first responders.
Hey, thanks for coming in.
Anytime.
Good
Always
to
a
see you.
joy.
Thank you. Well, that's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back next week. We'll do it all again. Don't forget cnyhomepage.com. There's lots of good stuff there. Until next time, take care of yourself, everybody.